All right, well, glad you're here. We're starting a new quarter tonight and some good options. I appreciate you taking the time to join us. So I thought of this class some time back when I was having a conversation with a student. We were talking about a particular couple different words and some definition, and it made me think of, that might be a good class to think of, look through different words that we use all the time, right? Like holy and salvation and spirit but do we really understand the meaning? And I don't mean in the sense of you put a bunch of words or a bunch of letters together and they make a particular word and we have a sound that comes with that and we associate it with a significant agreed upon meaning. I'm pretty sure we can read, the Bible and understand to that degree of it. But granted that if the words, the Bible's been written a couple thousand years ago and more, that there is historical, cultural, all kinds of things upon it, the meaning of words are more complex than I think we make the time to understand. Because definitions matter, right? Definitions matter. And how we use words matter. Let me give you some examples. And this I'm not trying to stir politics or even get you on one side or the other, but some examples. For example, on the topic of abortion, we have two major camps, right? We have pro-life and pro-choice. You think those particular descriptors were chosen accidentally? Right? Each one of those is emphasizing a particular way to think about it. Right? Another one, illegal aliens or undocumented immigrants. Right? Also, a different. There's reasons that it's called one or the other. How about the church that I attended in Olathe, Kansas? One of our elders had his wife, a lovely lady. Her name was Gay. Does that have more than one meaning to that word? Right? So definitions matter. The way the words are put together matter. And words over time can change the meaning behind the same word. It can be used and thought of differently. Not just that, words don't just carry meaning, they embody feelings, right? They evoke emotion. They have memories, experiences. It all taps into that. And not only that, culturally, words aren't defined because the definition of words are, in a sense, a social construct. And because of that, put 2,000 years of distance from the original intent and the original words and the original meaning in a different language on top of that. Some of that dead language, right, that isn't spoken that particular way anymore, particularly that version of Greek. And then we pull out a verse in the Bible and we read it in English in whatever preferred translation you're most comfortable with. And we say, "Thus saith the Lord." And we assume that just because we can read that English sentence or we can understand one particular word, that we're in tune with the original intent of that word. And I think we need to be more intentional than that. Let me give you another example. The word submission. Does that carry a social meaning? Does that evoke emotion? Does that tap into certain social movements? Does it carry an overall positive baggage? So with things like that, we need to be more mindful, because at times we take a word that has been translated, say the word submission, and we have a visceral reaction to it because of our current context or even our most recent of history. And we then take all that negativity and impose it upon what we think the authors meant. What if we're wrong? What if we're imposing meaning that really isn't there? Or we're conjuring in our minds applications that word really does not carry. You see why I think this topic is relevant? So we're going to walk through that, and we're going to have a handful, well, more. I have about 15 or so, but I got to narrow it down. I think we have 12 classes. And if you have, I'm writing this as we go. So if you have a particular word you really would be interested in, you also just let me know, and I'll try to see if I can put it in there. But the main idea for the outline of the class is we're going to look at a word each time, and we're going to try to look at the word. We're going to maybe use a little Hebrew, a little Greek. I'm not an expert at any of that, but I know just enough to go look at the right places to get some definitions. And then we're going to try to not just, here's the meaning of the Hebrew, but we're going to then try to see how that fits in a particular context where those words are used. And then we're going to try to make some applications today. So yes, there is modern applications to be made. But the Bible was not the original authors did not have Oklahoma City, Americans in mind. Right? God had a very broad vision of where all that needed to go. So we can and should make modern applications, but only after we have taken the time to do diligent and understand as best as we can the original intent. Then modern applications will probably be more correct. Just pull out a verse, and yay, Jesus, and here's what it says. We're running a risk of imposing meaning upon it. Fair? Questions? Good? All right. If you thought that I was going to start in Genesis, let me go ahead and assure you that I am. So, how could I not, right? It's the very beginning, so we need to start there. So we're going to start in Genesis, and our word for tonight is going to be spirit. I think it's a very foundational, important word. It has a lot of relevance and a lot of different reoccurring moments of that word throughout the storyline. It's an overarching theme, important concept. And so we're going to start with spirit, and then our very next week is going to be holy, which I think those two go hand in hand and play also, like I said, a foundational role in the story. So spirit, what comes to mind with the word spirit? Holy, okay, yeah, we often put it together with that. What else? What are some modern? Yeah, ghosts, right? You got spirits and Halloween and candy, perhaps. Yeah, so the spiritual world.
Maybe essence?
Yeah, one's essence, spirit of the person.
Unseen.
The unseen, yeah, the spiritual world. Good, so the Hebrew word it's there on your handout, is the word ruach, right? There's this ruach, right? Coffee not required. But, so the ruach of God, or the ruach, and the word itself has basically three meanings, and it's easily interchangeable. It is the word for wind, it's the same word for spirit, and it is the same word for breath. Okay? The only difference in what meaning is used when is the context, because it's the same word. So those seem pretty different, right? You got the wind blowing outside, you got somebody breathing on each other, not during the pandemic, that was actually the problem. And then you have the idea of spirit, which is probably more in line with, you know, some of the imageries that we're thinking of God and holy and Jesus and baptism and so forth. Well, so it's not necessarily a religious word. It's just a word that can be used interchangeably, once again, for those three things. Not only that, what does maybe overarch and threads through all three, it's this unseen energy, unseen force that is, you know, the wind has a force behind it, the breath, you take a deep breath and so forth. And the idea of God is this energy and this force. And so when you hold that as the thread between all three, we'll start to see how that's relevant as we go on. So in Genesis chapter 1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, and now the earth was formless and empty, and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. Okay, in Hebrew, there's a lot of cool things going on here, so let's try to unpack some of this so we can understand the word here, spirit, right? That's that word, ruach, the Spirit of God. So, in the beginning, God, the word God there is the generic word. It's Elohim. It literally means spiritual one, right? Spiritual being. So in the beginning, a spiritual being created the heavens and the earth. Now, the ancient readers would have been like, yeah, we're on board with spiritual gods, you know, whatever, creating things. Which spiritual being? So it would have evoked already a question. And I think it starts with that generic idea of a spiritual being, because it wants to bring the readers in to contemplate which spiritual being, and then the story is going to start to make what spiritual being that is clear. The progression of creation is going to help define what spiritual being we're talking about. Later in the story, it just flat out says Yahweh, Lord God. Lord, you know, Yahweh, Elohim, Lord God. So then it starts to kind of introduce you more personally and intentionally to what God are we talking about. But the creation story then, by design, is to introduce you to this God. Right? In the world of gods, real or imaginary, everybody had a God in that ancient world. Okay, so this spiritual being, we translate capital G, God, creates the heavens and the earth. So don't think the atmosphere or the skies where birds fly, and don't think like dirt. What he's saying here is this God created the realms. Probably a more accurate translation for our modern understanding. And what he has in mind here is the heavens was where in the ancient mind, in the ancient reader's mind, lived the gods. They lived above because they're more than us. So think like Mount Olympus, it's the above. Now, there might be some version of the gods down below, but that's for a particular reason. But the gods lived above, this spiritual reality. And then this realm, what he's calling here earth, is the physical realm. So think in the beginning, a spiritual being creates the spiritual realm and the physical realm. We following so far? What did this physical realm begin as? chaotic. It was stormy. It was murky. It was formless. It was scary. It was uncertain. Just think of like a chaotic storm. In the ancient world also, water was not something you just wanted to have home by the beach. Water was a place of uncertainty, of creatures of the deep, of unmeasurable, unpredictable storms that could just come upon you and then they would swallow you. So it was a symbol of chaos. And it starts that way, right? It starts chaotic, stormy, uncertain. Then over that deep, that realm of uncertainty, is hovering the Ruach of Elohim. So what is that? The breath of Elohim, the wind of Elohim, the spirit of Elohim, right, is hovering over this chaotic existence. And in English, it doesn't make that very clear. It says like, so, over the surface of the deep, so the word translated deep, and then, and the Spirit of God hovering over the waters. So those two words, deep and waters, are two words for a body of waters. The difference is what's translated in English deep is the word for chaotic, stormy-like waters. Dangerous, unsure, stormy waters. The word that's translated water here is in the Hebrew the word for calm, life-giving waters, like something that would water your garden. So what takes chaotic waters into life-giving waters? The Spirit of God. That's the difference. Surely you can already be thinking of moments in the New Testament where there's bodies of water and the Spirit of God is over it, which we'll get there, so hold. So the Spirit of God here, as you're asking yourself, what kind of spiritual being is this? Whomever he is, his very presence is enough to take chaos to order, darkness to light, storminess to life-giving. All he had to do is just be present. You're like, wow, what God is this? So you see what the Hebrew writer is trying to do in English? You're kind of like, Does this make sense? So there's something about the Spirit of God, the Ruach of God, that's very presence is transformative. It's powerful. It demands reaction. And it's about betterment. Right? We go from chaos to order, life to death, darkness to light. Thoughts, questions?
Yes. Yeah. How did the chaos get there in the first place?
Okay, that's a very good Western American question. And the reason I ask that, because even the other creation stories, competing creation stories of the time, from the Babylonians, the Egyptians, the Assyrians, they all start with some reality already existing. Like the Babylonian story starts with this kind of primordial, talking about Marissa having a baby. What's the water that's in the, what is that called? Amniotic fluid, thank you. So the Babylonian story begins with some kind of amniotic fluid thing already existing. And out of that, it spawns their first god, just out of that waters. And you're like, where did that come from? The ancient mind did not care about nothingness to something. What they cared about was chaos to order. So they didn't care that there was something there. They wanted to know, how do we go from the chaos to the order? So they don't take the time to explain that here either. It just presupposes that, well, it affirms that God existed, and then these realities begin out of God. So why did this reality start chaotic if God's already at the, he's in charge? Perhaps to make the point that it's his presence that makes the journey from chaos to order. Good question. In Genesis 2, then in Genesis 1, we have, God, and there's light, which the very next sentence is, there is light. That's not yet talking about the sun and moon and stars. That's like day 4. It's just, that's what God is. Light. He's just brightness. He's energy. He's the opposite of darkness. And then we go through creation there in Genesis 1. In Genesis 2, we have Genesis 1 is kind of like this cosmic creation reality. Genesis 2 is more of, now let's focus on this physical realm. And in Genesis 2, it's highlighting something very important about humanity. And here's the verse, Genesis 2, chapter 2, verse 7. Then the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. Couple things here. So the word man there is really the word Adam, which means humanity. Adam. It means humanity. It then becomes a name, but it literally means humanity. So here God creates Adam, and from the dust, or in Hebrew, the Adamah, so he's playing a word off of it, Adam, out of the Adamah, and you can even hear it in English. He's going to create, out of this physical reality, there's going to be a humanity, but the humanity starts just like a bag of dirt. Not a dirt bag, because that's a different meaning altogether. So a bag of dirt is like just this fleshly dust put together. Okay, but it's not really anything yet. What animates it? What brings something of this physical world to life? Yeah. Or the Spirit of God. Right? They're synonymous. It's the breath, the Spirit of God comes upon this something physical, and it brings it to life. So, from the very concept in Genesis 2, humanity is the lining up of physical and something of God. So when Jesus comes, being introduced as God in the flesh, that's not a new category. It's something that humanity, to a degree, was meant to be and really did not achieve it very well, or did not live it out very well. So Jesus is claiming, just by saying he's God in the flesh, he's claiming to be Genesis done, redone. Humanity done over. Let's do it again. And Jesus claims to then be humanity actually done right and lived out as humanity should have. Now, we start out right, but then Genesis 3, we're going to go live something that's actually going to be separating this again. And we're going to be living an existence where the Spirit of God is being pushed out of us, and we're just then back to death. Back to dust we go. And so, does this make sense? So that's what Jesus is claiming to be. So, two things here, right? God is transformative. His very Spirit is transformative. And his very Spirit is also animating. It brings life. It's an energy that makes this physical reality be more. Right? So when we talk about humanity having a soul, I think that's another way of thinking about it, because we have something of God that's made this physical reality come to life. And so humanity's never been some disembodied spirit floating around that then now takes on a physical form. We've always been dust in the presence of God. We're that combination. So from the Spirit of God, life is brought forth. Thoughts, questions, making sense? All right, so the imagery and the significance of the presence of God is a reoccurring theme from Genesis 1 to Revelation. Where in Revelation we have this new Garden of Eden imagery. And in Revelation we don't have a sun. We S-U-N, we have just the presence of God. And that is the light. And there's the imagery of a tree, and there's an imagery of water. Like it's Genesis, it's the Garden of Eden imagery redone. And it's all because the presence of God is there, and we have regathered around his presence and Jesus and so forth. So let's look at a few examples of this reoccurring theme of the presence of God besides Revelation. Isaiah 61, 1-3, and you could also see this in Isaiah 6, but let's read 61. It says, the Spirit, or the Ruach of the Sovereign Lord, is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom to the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn, and provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. They will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of his splendor. There's so much imagery here of Genesis. There's imagery here of the moment in history that Isaiah is writing this. The northern 10 tribes had just been almost zeroed out and annihilated from the Assyrians. There's ashes, smoke, despair, uncertainty, chaos, destruction. So he's using imagery of Genesis. He's talking about that very particular moment in time, and he's saying, you know what's going to bring life back to this? What's going to push chaos out of this? You know what's going to bring justice to the oppressed? What's going to bring judgment on those that destroyed? The Ruach of God. So the presence of God in a time of national tragedy, in a very poetic way, Isaiah reminds the readers of Genesis and the presence of God and the transformative, life-giving presence of God there. And if God did it then, he will do it now because he's upon us. Now, Jesus later quotes this when John the Immerser, John the Baptist, just clarification, I'm sure every single one of you know this, a Baptist is not his religious affiliation or last name. Okay? It's John, the one that's out there immersing folks. But that was too long, so they just went with John the Baptist. So John the Baptist is now in prison because he's also been kind of wordy and mouthy about the political establishment. And he had some choice words to say about the king of the Jews, who was a horrible human being. And so he's in prison, and he's unclear. He was convinced Jesus was the one at the baptism of Jesus, which we'll talk about in a second. But now he's in prison, and Jesus is going around, and he's not talking about doom and punishment and the fall of Rome and sinners will burn at the hands of an angry God. And John's confused. So he sends representatives to Jesus to ask, are you really the Messiah, or shall we expect another one? And Jesus says, go back to John and quote to him Isaiah 61, 1-4. So Jesus takes these verses to also mean not just the time in history of Isaiah, but Isaiah was already being prophetic about another time in history. Because if you haven't noticed this, we like to repeat the messes we've made. Sometimes an even grander scale to outdo the previous generation, right? So we just repeat. And so in the time of Jesus, humanity was at a moment of chaos once again. The Jews were at the back end of the 700 years before Jesus. 600 of those, they had been oppressed by foreign pagan powers, including the moment of Jesus by the Romans. So Jesus says, actually, what Isaiah was saying then, I am in full. I am the presence of God who's going to come to, I've been anointed by the presence of God to be betterment and comfort and judgment and joy and freedom and liberty and order and so forth. Then the baptism of Jesus, think about this. It's the Spirit of God coming down over the waters, right? Like Genesis 1. And I'm very convinced Matthew has Genesis in mind, because in Matthew chapter 1, where it says the genealogy of Jesus, so the word genealogy, and then a few verses later, when it says the birth of Jesus, the word birth, in Greek, it's actually the same word, genealogy and birth, it's the word Genesis. So Matthew is winking and saying the Genesis of God. Go back to Genesis. And then when he says the birth, he says once again the Genesis of God. He wants the reader to think of Jesus as Genesis redone. He is Genesis done right? Or Genesis redone, a new humanity. So here we have the same imagery of Genesis 1. There's a body of water, and then the Spirit of God here just kind of hovers over it. And there you hear a voice, "This is my Son of whom I'm well pleased." It's almost like saying, this is a humanity I'm creating that's actually going to live in a pleasing way. And the way, so Jesus was already alive, right? But it's saying, I am now, the Spirit of God is upon him. Not just as a human being alive, but a human being alive and with the power and presence of the Spirit that we saw in Genesis. Jesus has all the fullness of that. And unlike humanity up to then, and since then, he's actually going to live in a way that's pleasing, where humanity has really deeply struggled ever with that. So then he is immersed in the waters of chaos, right? The waters of uncertainty, the waters of tragedy, and he comes out of it as this anointed one of Isaiah, with the presence and Spirit of God who's going to now transform the world. He's going to bring order to the chaos. He's going to bring life to death. He's going to bring freedom to the captives of sin, and you can just go on and on and on. Then in Acts chapter 1, we have another imagery of the Spirit of God. The folks there, the disciples, are gathered. The Spirit of God comes upon them. It shakes things up. They are empowered to be a voice unto the nations, and so they can speak different languages. And then Peter gives a good overview of the Old Testament and makes the case that Jesus is the promised one. Right? He's the Jedi who's going to come and bring balance to the Force. And then to all of those that are interested in that worldview and that reality and that version of humanity, they come to Peter and the others and say, how can we get out of this horrible mess we're stuck in? And Peter says, turn around, which literally is the word for repentance. Stop living the version you were off on the sunset. Turn around, come back to the presence of God, and He's going to forgive your sins, which has been problematic, and His Spirit will come upon you. So it's not, okay, everybody there was already biologically alive, but this new life, this life that really is transcendent as we were created to be, comes now through Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection. And so now every single one that has come to Jesus is now carrying not just being alive, but they are carrying the Spirit of God that is transformative, that is about power, that is about betterment, that is about freedom. And we are now a version of humanity that we actually were intended to be, but has been lost along the way. How cool is that? Thoughts on any of that? Questions? Okay, so I got a question, 3 questions for you as a matter of fact. One more thing. Almost forgot this. In John chapter 20, on the other side of the resurrection, Jesus appears to the disciples who are in a house behind locked doors, freaked out of their minds that they're going to be next. And Jesus appears to them and says, "Peace," and then breathes upon them. It's like, Jesus, are you not aware of COVID? What does that look like? You just, like, what is, you're like, you know, you've been in the grave too long. Like, what? No, here's what he's doing. He's giving the same breath of God, that the same breath, the idea of what we see in Genesis 2. They were a group of people that were freaked out, in chaos mode, afraid, scared, hiding. And so Jesus comes on the resurrected end and says, "Be at peace. Look what I have just done. Look who I really am. And now let me breathe upon you, just like in Genesis 2, and now be alive." And on the other side of this, every single one of them, with the possible exception of John, who might have died of old age, were bold and ready to face whatever came. And we looked at Acts just last week, right? The last couple of weeks. Peter and John are basically like in the face of government saying, "Yeah, we're not going to listen to you." So that's very cool and powerful. And that's really what's happening there. I don't think it's just randomly blowing on, look what I can do. I mean, I think it's more profound than that. All right, 3 quick questions for you. So throughout the story, we know that God has called on people. Joseph is an example. He was filled with the Spirit of God. Isaiah is another example. There's many, many, many more. And they were empowered to do tasks, Moses, that were only because of the presence of God. What would be a modern application for us today? How does still today the Spirit of God empower us? How does that look? What does that look like? I don't know if it means I can do all things as I then go and like throw this ball really far, or just swing a bat and hit it really, really, really far. I don't think that's what he's talking about. But what does the Spirit of God empower us to do today? Okay, yes, to embody God, the presence of God unto others, to share the good news to the captives, right? To take the news to the oppressed. Yeah, to be messengers. What else?
Romans 8:26 says, "The same way the Spirit helps our weakness, for we do not know how to pray as we should."
Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever struggled to put in word a certain amount of tragedy? You just have there's no good way to articulate it. I think God knows, right? Jesus has been there. He's been there. So in the act of baptism, Acts 2, Romans 6. The presence of God's Spirit is given as a gift. What transformative role does the Spirit still play today? What is the Spirit able to do in a transformative way?
They pay out the order.
Yeah?
Take somebody's life and jack up, screw your lives up all around and turn it around.
Yeah. Yeah, God can do that cosmically and, put the universe in order and all that. But I think the point is also he can do that in your life. Whatever that chaos is in there, whatever fear, whatever anger, darkness, death, whatever decay, whatever's happening there, God can be transformative. I think we live in a Western world. We're very science prone. We don't want to be like all hippity dippity and talk about, like, I feel the presence of the Spirit. Like we're just kind of, that's not our vibe. But I think sadly we've just thrown out the baby with the bathwater and we've just completely the Spirit is there doing something somewhere, but we just go about it as if it's not. Lord.
I was thinking, so often we look to like the physical manifestations that we can say, well, yeah, that was it, like the turning water to wine, whatever. But I think the transformative presence to me of God's Spirit is the continual cleansing of our sin
Yeah.
and making us right before God.
Yeah, the continual washing. I think we just need to believe. And then we need to act as if it's possible. Basketball, almost like most of the game is really pointless and irrelevant until the last 4 minutes. You can be 25 points behind and still come back. So I really just watch the last 5 minutes just to give a little extra time. And when you're behind, all you got to really do is believe it's possible. You don't even have to understand the next 15 plays. I think that's what we need. Hey, your marriage's falling apart, you're this, that. Just believe the Spirit of God is with us. I don't know how it's going to happen. Well, I don't either. Let's just do the next right thing and trust that God is capable. And finally, so like in Genesis 2, the presence of God is breathed upon us. It empowers us. It gives us life. It brings us, energizes us. I mean, the same point. All these 3 questions are 3 ways of saying the same thing. I think, in my humble opinion, and since I am the world-leading expert in my opinion, I feel good in giving it to you. We have really sanitized the power of God's Spirit in us. We just washed it out, put it aside, put it back here somewhere. Something's happening, but we don't want to talk about it because we don't want to sound all like, I don't know, Pentecostal or something. I think we've done this a great disservice because the Spirit of God is still active today.
It's our birthright.
It is. We were created to be the power of God.
The more we bring our lives in alignment with His will, the more the Spirit of God dwells within us.
Yeah.
It's like we walk in the Spirit, or we're walking in the flesh.
Yeah.
We add the Christian virtues. It's a step ladder, and the more we're adding those, the more we're in line with His Spirit, and more of His Spirit dwells within us.
I agree. Okay, so next class we're going to talk about the word holy, and then we're going to see how that plays into the word spirit, and we're just going to go from there. Holly, did I say Holly? We're going to talk about the word holy. English is not my first language. Neither is Hebrew, Greek, Aramaic, apparently not even Portuguese. So we'll talk about possibly Holly, holy for sure. All right, thanks for being here.